Many believe that obtaining a Master of Business Administration degree will be the golden ticket to riches and a successful career. But MBA students and graduates will tell you that getting this degree can have a massive impact on your lifestyle. The second Finweek MBA Lifestyle Impact Survey takes a closer look at what an MBA degree will do for your career and your finances, but most importantly, what sacrifices you may have to make to get there. In studio, we have Gavin and Colette Symanowitz, who conducted the MBA Lifestyle Survey, and also Jonathan Andrews, who's an MBA graduate from the University of Cape Town. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps let me come to you first, Colette. We've seen a lot of these MBA surveys coming out into the market. What differentiates this particular one from the other offerings, and who are you targeting as your audience?
Well, we survey MBA current students and graduates in order to help prospective MBAs make a more informed decision as to should they do an MBA or not, and what are the factors that are going to be impacted in their lives, and based on that, which business school they should study at. So it's really a mix of all MBA audiences, prospective, current students, and MBA graduates. In answer to your second question about what makes this survey different, well, looking at some of the traditional surveys, there's been a focus on career remuneration, how it's going to advance your career, and looking at salaries before and after. But there's a lot of flaws, mathematical flaws in that calculation. For example, it often doesn't take into account the time value of money, inflation, the trajectory that individual would have been on had they not done an MBA. Right. There would have been an increase in their salary. So we take an actuarial approach, Gavin being the lead researcher, being an actuary, and remove all of those flaws and get real figures as to what the MBA can deliver.
Yeah. Before we get into the details of what the survey threw out with you, Gavin, I perhaps want to come to the recent MBA graduate, Jonathan, at the desk, and ask you, Jonathan, when you were taking the decision to pursue an MBA, what were you buying in essence?
Well, I was hoping to buy myself a better life and a better lifestyle, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, if that financial sort of gain was definitely a massive factor in my decision to undertake it. I kind of felt that I was plateauing a bit at work and was perhaps a little bit understimulated. And having come from a more humanities kind of background in my undergrad degree, felt I needed to, skill up, I suppose, on the more sort of the business acumen side, and hope that would sort of elevate me, in my career, for sure.
Gavin, would you agree that for most MBA aspirant graduates who go into the program, that is the same reasons that they share Jonathan's sentiments in terms of what they want to get out of the program? And let's compare this with the findings of after the program. Have they really gotten that?
Yeah, so that's very much the case. When people start off doing an MBA, it's very much about attaining business knowledge, getting the soft skills that are useful in a business environment, getting the confidence within a business setting so that they can have the conversations, for example, with senior management that they wouldn't otherwise have, and to understand the terminology about that. So that's primarily the reason why people do it. But what we've found predominantly throughout the survey is that the value that people got out of it changed quite dramatically over the course of the MBA. So the MBA definitely met their expectations in those particular areas. But what they got out of it was much broader. Things like their outlook on life, the value of the MBA network, the impact on their self-confidence, their leadership in their personal lives, how they viewed opportunities in the world in general, their worldview, and it had a much broader impact on them.
If I can, just maybe add to that. Often there's a traditional view that people do an MBA in order to improve their salary. Yeah. But what we found in the survey is that most people, in fact 79% of people, did an MBA in order to advance their business knowledge. And that came out much more strongly than financial remuneration.
But Colette, I want to interject because an MBA is a hefty investment, whether you're paying for it yourself or you're getting the corporate to pay for it on your behalf. So there's an expectation that this is going to translate into some sort of financial upward movement, I would assume. But perhaps let's also look at it from the point of view of whether the survey has found that with those expectations, are we finding that the bulk number of people are actually getting promotions on the back of an MBA, or are they changing fields completely? And are we getting a strong number of people who are saying, actually, I'm going to take this degree and go and find my own path as an entrepreneur?
Maybe Gavin can add to this as well. I think it's a mix of yes and no, because the figures weren't resounding in any of those areas. Some did get promotions, some did not. Some advanced their careers. Some were disappointed that they didn't get what they thought they would get afterwards.
So is it worth it though? And I think that's the crux of the question. I mean, for something that costs almost 150,000 Rand over the 2-year period, is an MBA the answer or the key to corporate success in South Africa?
I think that the big factor to consider here is that if you ask most MBAs, and myself included, and I'm sure Jonathan will agree on this, the MBA is worth it.
Okay.
But you have to understand that it's going to impact many areas of your life in the short term negatively. And you have to be prepared for that, and you have to prepare your life partner for that, because it will be a rough journey. But afterwards, and the returns don't necessarily come immediately. If you ask alumni, the longer they've been out of the MBA, the returns seem to be greater, because you are able to translate those returns into something real in the workplace. Take that confidence, which is it's an invaluable life skill that you maybe didn't have before, or that ability to hold your own in a boardroom setting. Those skills are things that you can't really put a price on, and that's what the MBA gives you.
Now, I don't have an MBA, and I haven't thought about doing one, but I think a combination of this also has to do with time. When is the right time for one to think about doing an MBA? Because progression in a professional setting also has to do with time. It also has to do with experience. It also has to do with you paying your school fees over some period. So at what point would you then, according to what you found in the research, sit back and say, actually, now is perhaps the time to now upskill and go the MBA route and perhaps climb a few ladders up in the company?
Yeah, so we found 2 different groups over there. The average age of the MBA in our sample was 39 years. And we had some people who said, well, actually, they wish they had done the MBA much earlier because of the valuable knowledge, etc., that they gained, that had such an impact on their future career and their career trajectory that they wish they had all that knowledge much earlier in life rather than waiting until they were older. On the other hand, you had younger people who said they really valued the extra knowledge the people in the MBA class had, who were perhaps a little bit older, had more business experience, could bring some of that business experience into the classroom, add to the discussions, etc. So, there's a bit of a mixed bag within there, but the general consensus is that people would prefer to have done it earlier, even though perhaps the quality might have been better if it was waited a bit later.
If I can maybe add to that, the trend in South Africa is to do an MBA slightly later, as Gavin said, in your 30s. If you look at America, if you look at Europe, they tend to go straight from an honours degree into their MBA and have much less work experience, which means that they have much less personal examples in order to relate to the communications, and then they themselves are less valuable as classmates because they can add less to the discussion.
Colette, is there a differentiator in terms of men and women? Take into consideration the fact that women also have to factor in making babies and all the family responsibilities that come along the same time as you're doing these studies?
Well, as a woman, I don't believe that. How can I say? I've got very counterintuitive, controversial views on this, and I don't believe women should get special treatment. But going into an MBA, there was definitely more men doing the program, and it's still the case today than there are women. And there are a lot of schools, obviously, that are working towards improving those ratios, but worldwide, it's still a fundamental problem. But I think that's where the value of the MBA comes in. Is as a woman, it is a very powerful program for teaching you to be confident in a setting that is predominantly male-dominated.
Let me bring Jonathan back. I mean, post-MBA, did you find that the brand of the institution where you went counted more than the MBA, or did you find the fact that you had an MBA in hand was sufficient, irrespective of where you got it from?
I think where you do it is important. I mean, I graduated relatively recently, so I don't know that I've necessarily, had it for long enough to kind of tell. I could talk about my decision, and I definitely chose the school based on its reputation and its, scores and rankings and internationally and stuff like that. I don't think an MBA is an MBA because I know that the programs are quite different too. Some schools focus a lot more on the sort of soft skills and the leadership aspects. Others are completely case-based. So it really just depends, I suppose, on what you want. And I think it's important to, when you're sussing it out, to actually go to introductory evenings and learn about the ethos of the school, meet some of the staff, look at the research that they do. And to see whether it's a good fit for you, because the class and that environment is so important. You won't come out learning how to do accounting, for example. But the discussions that you have around that are so important. So it's who's teaching it and who's participating. That's important.
On that issue that Jonathan is alluding to, Gavin, how much of an impact does the choice or the school that you went to do an MBA have on you trying to get a job? Because you might find that you go to a company and the HR director or whoever is screening candidates went to a UCT, for example. So chances are he's more likely to say, I'm a UCT graduate, therefore I know and understand the programs, therefore I have I trust that program more than any other of the universities that I haven't gone to. How much does that have an impact?
Well, that's actually one of the differentiators of this survey versus the traditional ones, where traditional surveys are very much clouded by that reputational bias, where you have the bigger schools. So, for example, they'll go ask the hiring managers, who do you think are the best schools? And by virtue of the fact that they may have done an MBA, and just by numbers alone, they're more likely to have done it at one of the top 4 schools, and so that's who they're going to recommend. What we did in the surveys is said, well, let's level the playing field. So we're not going to take the effect of reputation. We're going to completely ignore the reputation of the big school and rather focus just on the impact of the MBA on that person's life. Now, what you were speaking about there is just their career trajectory and what employers think about hiring the MBA. But that's just one small slice of the overall impact that it had on the broader life experience of that particular person. And what we found there is that then the reputation of the school is not that important. In fact, people across all the business schools gained tremendous benefit overall in terms of the impact on their life of the MBA.
What matters the most in an MBA qualification? Is it the school? Is it the program? Is it the history of, I don't know, the history of the people that have graduated from a particular school, where they've gone, where they are in life?
So I think that's very subjective based on the person's unique experiences and what they value in life. So what we did with the surveys, we said, well, let's break it up into all the different areas that could impact your life, from not just career and salary progression, but also things like your outlook on life, the impact on your personal life while you're studying, the value of the network, all those kind of things. And we said, let's look at each of them separately and in isolation and see which of the schools score highest in those particular areas. So that when someone is thinking of doing an MBA, they can say, well, this particular area, let's say the network is particularly important to me, and so I'm going to choose the school that people feel they got the most value out of the network. Or it might be that I'm a family man, I've just got young kids, and I really don't want to have a negative impact on the relationship with my wife and my family, so let me choose the school that has the lowest impact in that particular area, which is important to me.
Let me quickly bring Colette in on this aspect of the personal life. I mean, there's been lots of interesting statements about the impact of an MBA on your sex life, on your health, on your marriage. What's been your personal experience? And I know I'm putting you in a corner because your husband is sitting right next to you, but I think I trust you to be authentic on this one.
Well, it is a very difficult question. You see, because I was in a very unusual situation where I actually resigned, started the MBA, and then started a business out of the MBA, and I wasn't in the majority. So yes, it's a very difficult process, and if your marriage isn't strong at the beginning, it probably won't stand the journey. So I think that's the most important thing, is making sure you go in there informed, understanding the impact that it can have, and bring your partner in that process.
Very quickly, before you jump into this, I see Jonathan is like avoiding my eyes like the plague on this question. Are you having flashback memories? Did you lose someone during your MBA?
No, thankfully not. I was quite fortunate in that my now fiance was actually living overseas at the time. So I think the long distance possibly helped. Because I know that there certainly were people in the class, I think, who struggled to get that sort of work-life balance. So yeah.
I learned something very valuable from someone that did the MBA with me about this pursuit of work-life balance, that it isn't really there, but you've got to focus long-term. And the MBA is a 2-3 year degree, depending which option you choose, but it's going to be over. but your career will still be there and your family will still be there. So in terms of priorities, focus on your family first, then your career, and then your MBA. You shouldn't put the MBA above everything and let all those other things drop. Otherwise, you'll lose your family in divorce, and you'll lose your job through demotion or other people getting promoted over you. And it isn't worth it in the long term to say strive for that cum laude at the expense of everything else.
We've got less than a minute to go. Maybe Thandisito, do you want to throw in your burning question?
No, I was just going to say, ultimately, you spend 150,000 doing this qualification. Obviously, at the end of the day, you want a return on investment. Does it give you a return on investment, money-wise?
Yeah, so money-wise, we actually answered that question. We said, is it worth actually borrowing money in order to fund an MBA? And what we did is we said, let's calculate what is the impact of the MBA on your future salary growth. And we found that it adds on average 2.1% extra on your average annual salary growth over and above what you would have earned anyway. Taking that into account, let's say we use that to fund the interest on the loan that you have to take out. It would take about 8.4 years to repay the MBA. But of course, it's not just a financial return. There's all the non-tangible benefits that you get out of it. And so overall, the conclusion is that the MBA does require short-term sacrifices, but in the longer term, it's overwhelmingly positive, and people are very happy that they did it.